Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome everybody to the Council chambers this evening. We're glad you're here. Second item is disclosures of pecuniary interest. I'll ask any member if they have a pecuniary interest with anything that they would like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can declare one anytime if you need to. Next is additions, deletions, or amendments. We don't have any of that. Next, after that, is open forum, and we have 4 requests for open forum this evening from Dan Frank, Peggy Corrigan Dench, Steve Rowland, and Patricia Frank, all of which are related to correspondence. I take that to mean, I assume it's the correspondence from Mr. Mann. So that's related to the waterfront development. We've heard from Mr. Frank, Dan Frank, and Patricia Frank on the waterfront development within the last 6 months. So those 2 requests for open forum delegations are out of order and will not be heard. Item number 2 and 3, Peggy Corrigan Dench and Steve Rowland, we will hear. So Miss Peggy Corrigan Dench. Each open forum is 3 minutes in length. So we'll ask you to come forward, Miss Dench.
Hi, my name is Peggy Corrigan Dench. I'm speaking to the communication with regard to the request for proposal. I live at 737 Green Street. I've been a resident of Port Elgin for 6 years and have been coming here with my family since I was 3 years old. I wrote an email to Mayor Charbonneau in the hope that he would share it with council. I wondered how would I know whether or not that had been shared with regard to my correspondence. I read the minutes from the ad hoc committee, September the 11th. Many of the concerns regarding the size and scope of the proposal for the waterfront revitalization were discussed, and I assume that these will be brought forward in their report to council. I wish to add a couple of concerns. Number 1, with respect to the speed of the request for proposal. The request for proposal had a brief timeline, February 4th to March the 12th. The idea is to attract several bids, to look at those bids for the best quality, most competitive bid at the lowest price. The timeline was adjustable for the town. They had reserved the right within the request for proposal to amend the timeline if they chose. They did not do that. It's my understanding that only 1 bid was received. The Cedar Crescent proposal had no other competition. Perhaps the original timeline should have been extended in order to receive more bids. Is it possible that the RFP could be reopened so that more bids could now be received? The request for proposal was stated that the hope of the new enterprise would be open for business by 2020. I did an addition to my home when I first moved here, and I can tell you that with the size and scope of what they're planning, to try to do that by 2020 is pretty fast in my view. The online survey that followed the waterfront proposal was only available for public feedback for 2 weeks. The current online proposal, or online feedback for the overall planning for the town, is given 8 weeks. Why was there such a discrepancy? Why was there only 2 weeks given for people to give feedback on that online forum? A final concern is that the RFP states within it that there could be a minimum 10-year lease with an option for extensions. How did that become a 50-year lease? I just also wanted to reiterate that the current footprint of the train station, the mini golf, the tennis courts, that is the majority of us citizens that I've spoken to, that is the current footprint, that is the footprint we thought was going to be revitalized, and the current proposal goes way beyond that. All the way across Mill Street.
That's 3 minutes, Ms. Dench.
Thank you.
And that moves on to Steve Rowland, who's also here on the correspondence. Mr. Rowland.
Mr. Mayor and Council, thanks for letting me speak. My name's Steve Rowland. I live at 687 Harbour Street in Port Elgin, right down at the main beach. I've been there for over 35 years, and I'm a full-time resident. First up, all the people who live in the vicinity of the main beach in Port Elgin are not the enemy. We are collectively for development of the land on the main Port Elgin beach, identified clearly in the RFP in this drawing, circled, surrounded by red. We all know it's required to be upgraded. It's an embarrassment the way it is now. Nobody has objections for that at all. What should be done is I shouldn't be using the word myself, them, those people, but instead I should be using the word us, all of us here. All the people of Saugeen Shores, including council and the CAO, all should have the same objective of wanting a reasonable development that enhances and beautifies the main beach area. But we have to do it right and using the correct processes. To achieve that, we should follow the Waterfront Master Plan with a few minor tweaks. Being 10 years in the making and due to population shifts, maybe more flexible open space is required. The population has exploded here. And also, we should be following the RFP. The RFP meaning single-story buildings, a footprint within the RFP, surrounded in red. Do not create barriers between the town and the beach area. And nowhere does it state or recommend anywhere that we're having a wholesale liquidation of the entire beach area for commercialization. It's never been stated anywhere. But people can glean from any of the renderings floating around and the potential retail activity showing up on some of these drawings that that's exactly what's going on. There is so much confusion on the development right from this issue from the RFP to multiple renderings of concept drawings and different interpretations of the Waterfront Master Plan and the RFP. Yes, the majority of people in town are in favor of development, not necessarily the proposed one, if they truly knew what it was. In order to be able to confidently express any opinion, a final concept must be presented, reviewed by council, open for public review, then modified as required, and sent to the SVCA. Public meetings on speculation and rumor has been the sore point of a lot of friction, and thus the items like the correspondence we're talking tonight about. That would never even exist if we're clear and concise and transparent. I find it hard that council can be in favor of a development if we don't even know what it is. The source could be from a breakdown of transparency, lack of clear communication, and leaked documents developed on the developers' media sites. That's where I get a lot of my information. Now, some things we think we know about this development seem to be placing a footprint way outside
That's
the
3
RFP.
minutes, Mr. Rowland.
Some of the items speculated to be included in this development clearly in themselves are creating extremely undesirable outcomes, and some things like a 50-year lease is equivalent to selling the land and could result in loss of control. I have more, but I run out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our open forum. And we'll move on now to delegations. And we have Mr. Mann, you're out of order, sir. Sit down, please. Sit down, please. You're out of order. You're interrupting the meeting. You're out of order. Sit down, please. Sit down. You don't get to make points of order. Members of council do. Sit down, please. I'm asking you one more time. Sit down, Mr. Mann. Mr. Mann, sit down. You're out of order. If I have to ask you again, I'll have to suspend the meeting and we'll have to ask you to leave. Do you want me to ask you to leave? Sit down. I never have before. Okay. That moves on to delegations, and we have one delegation this evening, and that's from Kimberly Innes-Peterson, the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, and she's here to talk to us about the 2019 Christmas Parade.
Thank you for your time tonight, Mayor Charbonneau, councillors and members of the media and others here tonight. Sorry, I think there was supposed to be a presentation up there.
Give us half a sec.
Yep. I'm Kimberly Innes-Peterson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Saugeen Shores Chamber of Commerce. And I am here tonight to seek your input for consideration as we move towards unifying the Santa Claus parades. Is there a way that I can click through the slides, Linda? Sorry. just a little bit of a background. Historically, this was a town event that was passed on to the Chamber approximately 20 years ago, precedes me. Since then, the Chamber has done all the planning and the organizing of the two events. We also plan, along with our BIAs, 2 shoppers' nights, as well as 2 tree lightings at the same time. So the parade is a Chamber-branded event. It is funded by sponsorships from Chamber member businesses, and it is open to all to participate and to attend. In other communities, parades are actually managed by other community organizers. So, for example, in Hanover, it's the Kinsmen; Meaford, it's the municipality and the Kinsmen; and in Owen Sound, it's the Kiwanis. We respectfully ask for your support on our proposal for one Christmas parade. Our proposal is that we alternate between each community, starting in Southampton of this year, followed by Port Elgin of next year. So why did we make this decision? The Saugeen Shores Chamber of Commerce focuses on our members and their development, as well as our role in the economic health of the business community. We do this by acting as a business partner with the town in nurturing and cultivating a healthy business environment. While community events such as parades are vital to community well-being, the Saugeen Shores Chamber of Commerce, like any organization, must keep a strategic focus on its primary mandate. The way we've always done things is not a long-term, reasonable rationale in a changing environment. We measure program efficacy with our consumers in mind and make decisions that we, which include myself and the board of directors, who actually represent our primary consumer, believe are in the best interest of the Chamber. In measuring efficacy for the parades, we looked at 4 variables. We looked at manpower, risk, cost, and the parade route itself. So for Chamber staff, we invest approximately 120 daytime hours, plus an additional 12 hours of overtime, which we calculate to be approximately $3,000 in staff wages alone. We balance the planning of 2 parades with our other events at the same time, as well as our Chamber mandate. There's 3 Chamber staff and our families. We do volunteer our time for that night, for the parades. And what we've noticed is that in the planning and the managing and the organizing of 2 parades, that there is significant staff burnout. We lose time with our families, especially around this festive season, and we lose our work-life balance. We require volunteers for the safety of all our participants, as well as those who attend. Those volunteers, our numbers are declining. There's just waning interest, despite our best efforts to recruit. Some volunteers will say they'll show, and they don't. We look at the risks of performing 2 parades, and as our declining volunteer numbers go down, our liability does increase. So the Chamber is a small community-based nonprofit organization, and there is considerable financial and public relation risk if someone were to get injured. And people have gotten injured and in fact have died at parades. Last year in Nova Scotia, a young child was killed in a parade, and that actually called for an investigation into parade safety. The costs that you see up here on the slide, and I apologize for 2018, those numbers are reversed, and that number, the negative 137, is an error. It should be minus 700. But those costs do not include staff wages. Those are just the expenses that we incur, as well as the revenue that we can generate through sponsorships. There's hidden costs to this as well. We have insurance. We have repairs to floats, and any incidental material that staff will buy, Chamber staff will buy out of pocket. So we made some observations in 2018 during the parade, and what we noticed was that there were stretches of the parade routes that didn't have anybody there standing there to watch. There were very few businesses open. Some of the volunteers and participants said that the route was actually too long for them to walk in. And then even some participants who had floats can only have one float in the parade because of their own staff and volunteer limitations. So looking at all those different variables, those 4 variables, we put together a simple decision matrix. And what this measures are the 4 variables against the external pressures that we face. And we concluded there was a high level of risk for injuries, as well as having to cancel a parade if a staff member is sick or if we just don't get enough people to show up to help out. We put a lot of time into our staff put a lot of time, invest a lot of time and resources into the parade itself. So this is really about creating an opportunity for something greater while mitigating risks and reducing our staff pressures. So keep in mind that one parade conveys one community, which is Saugeen Shores. There's less work for town staff who have to set up the barricades and then clean up afterwards. And then there's another opportunity for having one really great parade as opposed to 2 parades that maybe are not so great. And then there's the potential to build something tourism related from that. So just to recap, the Chamber can manage one parade alternating between Southampton and Port Elgin, which would reduce the drain on our staff and increase the number of people who come out to view it. It's also an opportunity to enhance a unified community and to grow a Christmas-themed tourism event. Should the town or another group wish to assume responsibility for a second parade, the Chamber will gladly support and guide them. The Saugeen Shores Chamber of Commerce does welcome your input on this matter, which will be passed on to our Board of Directors for consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'll ask members if there are any questions or comments from members of the committee. Councillor Mayat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kimberly, for the presentation. I'll lead off the questions, and Cheryl and I have the advantage of being delegates to the Chamber of Commerce. We've had an opportunity to hear some of these facts and figures beforehand, and actually to discuss some of this as well. And certainly, this is something that it's a big decision that the Chamber is proposing, and there are some merits to that decision, and there's obviously some detractors to that decision as well. There are certainly a lot of people will end up being disappointed if we only have one parade, but I think, as Kimberly has pointed out, there's a lot of people that would enjoy coming to a bigger, grander parade. I know what you said there is that many of the businesses don't have the time, because we're only talking about a week apart, these 2 parades, don't have the time and the resources to put a float in both parades, so they put one in one if that's where their business is primarily located, and then lesser businesses or different businesses put one in the other parade. So I think it's something that deserves serious contemplation by this group, and look at the merits from a objective point of view, and don't get too dragged down in partisan type of issues, but more what the possibilities of this could be. I personally would not have a problem with condensing it to one parade. I understand. I've heard from the Chamber staff that they are really, really pulled 6 ways to Sunday on this thing. Imagine trying to put on an event like that with a group of volunteers, not to mention doing it 2 weeks in a row, right? So these people, and they end up calling on their parents and their best friends and their brothers and sisters to kick in, because, as Kimberly has also pointed out, volunteers are tough to get, and they sometimes, if there's they don't have a stake in the game, they sign up but they don't show up, and it makes it very difficult. And they've managed to pull this off despite these obstacles over the past few years, but it's getting more and more difficult. So I really hope to hear some more ideas on this around the table, and once again, give it serious contemplation, and don't poo-poo the idea without thinking about it carefully. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rich.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So looking through your report, I see a lot of reasons within the administrative side. Would you say this is something that's supported by chamber members? I serve on the Southampton BIA. It's certainly something that BIA membership wouldn't be in favor of. So I'm wondering if you in contact with chamber members have found that people are saying, oh, let's have only one parade, not two.
We didn't poll our chamber members. However, we have been discussing this at the board level, and we have, and our board they're chamber members, our chamber members, and they represent the membership. And they are in favor, majority of the board members are in favor of one parade. We have had people contact us, chamber members contact us from Southampton and Port Elgin to express that they are in favor of it, of one parade.
You've had some people contact you, or did you poll your chamber members? Like, do you have any documentation that would support this decision? We have our minutes from our meetings, from our board meetings, but actually most of the support that I've noticed came in today from Facebook after the Hub had written the article and made it public. A lot of our members on Facebook have actually said, I support this, and there's a number of them are chamber member businesses.
Further comments? Councillor Smith?
Just a point of clarification. You mentioned, through you, Mr. Mayor, there was mention in the delegation regarding the proposal for a bigger or larger or more comprehensive parade. Similarly, there was also a suggestion that a number of the participants had trouble with the parade route being at the length it was. Are you proposing a change to the length of the parade in order to accommodate the additional attendees?
We haven't actually had that discussion yet, the actual planning of it. This is a hurdle that we have to get over first before we can actually do the planning. So.
Okay, just a quick follow-up. I just would like to say, knowing the diversity of our community in terms of work schedules, we have a large portion of our community who are shift workers and often utilize the dual parades as the ability to take their children or families to see a parade that doesn't conflict with their shift schedules. So just take that into consideration. The
Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, Kimberly. Do you have board members here this evening at all?
No.
I'm just looking at
no. There are none here tonight.
You're offending. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, Pierre's here. Sorry, Pierre, didn't see you.
Should have seen you over there. Just a couple questions, a couple comments. The 2 shoppers' nights, 2 tree lightings are set. They'll continue.
Yes, so
I know it's BIA involvement, but as far as you know, those 2 of those events are still going ahead.
Yes.
Correct. I try to. It's going to be delicate. Obviously, one of the comments I liked in your presentation was that in the off year, there's nothing stopping a community group with lots of notice. That there's no, that Southampton's this year, Port Elgin's a year later. There's nothing stopping an organization in the community from organizing that parade in the off year, correct?
That's correct.
Right. So that can be done. I sometimes defer these questions, I like to get out into the community and ask questions of how people are feeling about issues of this nature, and I sometimes defer to my son and my daughter-in-law and my grandkids, and I had a good discussion with them, the family today, about this, and there was no hesitation in the voice. Give me one parade, and bring the two communities together, and maybe a little bit longer. We don't have to hire the same bands. I try myself to get to both parades every year, and there are a fair number of same floats. Not all the same, but there are a fair number of floats, the same floats in both parades. It's delicate. I imagine there'll be people in the community really opposed to this, but I think my feeling is that perhaps it's worth a try. And if Southampton's this year, and Port Elgin feel strongly that there should be a parade, then perhaps there's a service club out there. Some organization may take it on because they have a whole year's notice. So, anyways, I tend to agree with Councillor Mayad. I'm not sure how Councillor Grace feels, but as a chamber member, but I think it's maybe worth a try.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kim, for the presentation. Like Councillor Mayed, I sat in on the presentation to the board about this, the Chamber Board, and the young woman who really does the work on this is Terilyn Golbeck, who does a tremendous job on lots of events organizations. And we don't realize the dependence that we have on the wonderful volunteers in our community, but they are stretched really, really thinly. And many of the same people go back to the different events, and you see the same people. And when you have somebody calling on their brothers, sisters, whatever, friends to help out in this situation, and like many other events, you have the same kind of thing. But I think that's something we have to consider. I also like the idea of looking at this as an opportunity to make a really stunning parade that, not just for our residents, but as a tourism destination event. Because I've seen this kind of, I was having dinner with friends who said they go down to a parade down near Hanover that's, okay, but this one has some kind of special, I can't even remember exactly what the, that's it, Holstein and they started going to this with their children who are now in their 40s, and they go back every year now with their grandchildren. I mean, I think it's an opportunity for us to look at we should consider that factor anyway in making, in how we approach this. So that's all I'll say on that. Thanks.
Councillor Schreider.
Thank you, and through you. Just a question. When do you typically start to plan for the parades? Because I do understand that it is a tremendous amount of work for staff and volunteers, but when would you start planning for the 2019 parades?
The parades, it would have started planning this month, so earlier in September. Unfortunately, Miss Golbeck has had an unexpected death in her family, and she's off for a little while. So planning has stalled.
Okay, and then I guess just a question as well is that I think that this year in the operating budget that we did increase the operating budget for the chamber, if I believe, I'm not sure on the figure, but and I do understand that sometimes the volunteer well does dry up, but is there an opportunity to look at paid staff to help with the administration, to help with some of the volunteers, as well as that maybe there's a different operational or business plan in order to satisfy the two? I've been to both parades, I've driven floats in both parades, and there is a distinct feel between the two. Right or wrong or not, I think that this would be a pretty big decision, and I'm just wondering, that's why I asked the question about when you typically start. Like, is this something that we would look at for 2020 just for the sake of planning purposes and some staff shortages right now? Would that be a better decision?
Well, first I just want to point out that the parades are actually funded by sponsors. So we get sponsors, chamber member businesses will sponsor the parade. So that's how the parades are funded. Can we hire somebody? I mean, that's a good question. We've had a position at the chamber open that we can't fill. So, like everybody else here, we're also having a problem finding staff, and then to find temporary staff to plan an event that lasts one night. Then we're going to be looking into recruiting and training, and that's still a big investment there in time.
Okay, thank you.
The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. And Kimberly, thank you for your presentation. I have no doubt that some of the parades are a little long. I think the Port Elgin parade could be severely cut in half and stop at Ralph's. Getting out to the Giant Tiger is a long way to walk for the few people that are out there, and we don't want to miss anybody. And I do understand, probably better than most, how volunteerism has gone down. To run an event, it takes a lot of people, a lot of time. There are some problems, however. If by going to one community per year, we have residents who can't get around. We don't have a transportation system in between towns. How do you get from one town to the other to watch this? So there'd be a lot of people that way. When you mentioned that the executive of the chamber made the decision, I would like to see that it goes to the board, and all the board members have a say in this, and take it to the BIAs as well. Because it's important. Each town has a BIA, and I know they put money scheduled into doing the parades. So it'd be good to have all the three of them together to talk it out and see what's what. And you're going to get 50 of one and 100 of the other people saying yes, one, no. I like Councillor Schreider's idea. I know it's getting tight, but to say no this year, I think we're kind of jumping the gun. I'd rather see a little study done and come back to us early in the spring of next year with what the results are. There are ways that we can do it, and one way is to offer some paid help. There are groups that if you do offer them some money, they will come out and help, and that will assist you. I think that's the way we should be looking at it, not making the leap forward right now, and that's what council does. We look before we leap. So I think we need to take all the facts into consideration, look at the chamber, the whole chamber for their decision, the BIAs for their decision, and then come back to council early in the spring, and we can make this decision earlier in the year so that when it is time to start to prepare, everybody knows what it is, and we're not cutting off one without anybody really knowing it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Mayette, yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for a second chance. Just to respond to some of the comments, and I understand that it's a passionate issue, but I heard it right from Tara Lynn. We did, and really, without a significant influx of partners, i.e., Rotary, Lions, somebody to get on board and organize this parade, we're really talking about this girl's mental well-being. She was frazzled by the end of this. So, it's fine to say, let's just do it this year one more time. But, the volunteer base that they have to work with, unless that base gets significantly bigger in the short term, put together a committee of volunteers from community groups to take on some of the heavy lifting to do this dual event, just to say, let's just carry on and do it one more year and then we'll make a decision next year. I don't think it's really grasping what Kimberly's trying to say here, is that it's not really feasible to carry on the way that it's been carried on so far. So and once again, we're not going to make that decision. This isn't an agenda item for us to vote on. This is going to be the chamber that are going to make this decision with their board and through the input from their membership, right? So, I wanted to make that my last point. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think that I just wanted to clarify that point, and Dave just made it there, that we don't have the authority to sit here and order the chamber to host two parades. The chamber is going to host however many parades the chamber is going to host. Kimberly's here to hear our views on what we think about what their board is, or executive, I suppose, has already decided to do. So I think that's really important, just sort of drive home that this isn't really a council decision; it's a chamber decision, and Ms. Peterson's here to let us know, and to hear our thoughts on it. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Mayette raised a good point. Unless we get a rush of volunteers in, it can't happen. However, we haven't put that call out. This community rises to the occasion. Look at Canada's 150. We had lots of people. It's a few that started and then it grows. Has the call been put out? Have we said, are there people? Let's create a committee. Who wants to help organize and run these Santa Claus parades? Get it out there, see what kind of response we get.
And so I think we've heard lots of good input here, and I think that that's the thing. I mean, it's going to be in the press now. Folks will know in Port Elgin that at this stage, at least, no parade is planned in 2019 in Port Elgin, and service clubs and groups and BIAs, etc., in Port Elgin will be aware of that, and perhaps they'll take an interest. I mean, it is that both parades, in my experience, and I've been in both of them lots of times, are really well attended events, really popular events, and so it is. It's I hear what Kimberly is saying, and I understand that, but it's still sad, to think that you might lose one every year, and so. So I think it would be good if folks in the community would look at hosting it. And I think also, too, just the idea now in terms of tourism, I think, is more events, right? Doing more things, right? So doing fewer things, even if it is a sort of a duplicate thing, is, I think, overall not the direction we want to go. So, but what we need to do, I think, is talk more about how, because these pressures are real pressures, volunteers, that's a real pressure. You can't just wave your hand and say that doesn't exist. It does. So we need to overcome that. Hopefully we can talk about a bit about that with our tourism strategy. I talk about that virtually every time the Chamber comes in because it's an important thing we're working on with the Chamber right now. And perhaps this council can talk about how we will use our resources in the future towards some of these events and try to get more events like this going on in the community, because I think we have that opportunity through this tourism strategy to do some of those things. So anyway, I appreciate you. We appreciate you coming in tonight, Kimberly, and you've got some feedback from us. I'm sure you'll take that to your executive and to your board, and we look forward to the Chamber's work this holiday season. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So that moves us on to report of municipal officers and committees and the general government reports. We have two general government reports, and the first one is a staff report on building services software and the Director of Protective Services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Saugeen Shores 2019 capital budget included $140,000 for the purchase of software to modernize the way we receive and issue building permits. In the past 2 years, Ontario municipalities have made electronic building permit applications a reality. The traditional purchase and installation of complex software come at a significant financial burden, and in the past has been the service most used. Recently, staff have evaluated a new opportunity, a cloud-based permitting system which holds our information over the internet. Staff have been monitoring the use of a product called the Volta software by other municipalities as they've implemented the program in Ontario. The software saves time for both the applicant and staff. Permit processing team times have typically been reduced. All documents and comments are clearly displayed in the service, which means that the costly and time-consuming process of sending paper is no longer necessary. It has been determined that a Volta is our preferred solution and fits the requirements of our building department, and does not require the purchase of the software. So it's sort of like renting the software instead of purchasing the software. The service is intuitive and guides the applicant through various application processes, and what we're left with is a much more high-quality application. Electronic processing also decreases the volume of phone calls and email inquiries, and this will enable staff to focus their time on specialized tasks. The report goes on to explain the process a little bit, and the real benefactors of this program are the building applicants, the construction community, where they will get used to applying online, and it'll come much quicker to them.
Okay, so we have a recommendation. I'll read it, then we can take questions or comments. It's recommended that council pass a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the service agreement with eVolta for the use of their cloud-based building services software. Questions or comments from members? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Chief, the installation of this, since it is cloud-based, how much of that will be on our IT staff, and what is the serviceability of it? If there's a problem, do we look after it? Do we have to go to the company? What's the turnaround time?
Initially, we're expecting less than 3 weeks setup period, and that's all on included in the contract and supplied by the supplier, Volta. Very, very minimal pressures on our IT internal.
Okay. Oh, yep.
And as far as drain on the system, using it, does it take much? I'm not going to say power, but is it heavy? Is it going to chances of it collapsing or overuse? I know it's probably been tested out in many other communities, but how has it looked that way?
It is a fairly new product for Canada, but it's been around almost 30 years in Finland, so it's proven itself. They've adapted that same program to our Ontario Building Code standards, so now it lives within it. The drain or the demand on our servers is very, very minimal because it lives in a set of cloud-based servers, so that's where the bulk of the product is. The only thing that we will be responsible for memory-wise are files we want to back up, and we'll back up completed applications, as-built drawings, and final drawings that we want to keep possibly indefinitely. And that would be on our internal servers to back up the cloud-based servers.
And do we have plenty of space on our servers for that?
Yeah, it'll actually result in less space than we're using day to day now.
Any further comments, the Vice Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is very creative, and I think saving $140,000 in our capital budget is a good move. The $13,500, Chief, is a little bit concerning in terms of what happens after 5 years. And I would think that 13.5, there's no inflationary cost bill and cost of living. It's a straight 13.5 per year for 5 years. No additional cost year after year. It doesn't increase. It stays the same. What protection do we have now that they've locked us in for those 5 years? What protection do we have after the 5-year period?
We'll, of course, negotiate another contract. What we're seeing is that this is the trend across Ontario. So we've been in a discussion with over a dozen other local municipalities that are considering a Volta, and it'll simply be the negotiation in numbers that if enough of us are using it, we'll be able to negotiate a fair rate for both. I will mention that it's included in the building permit fees. It's not an additional charge.
I read that part. I'm just wondering. That was my only concern is, does it go to $27,000 in 5 years? What protection do we have? We really don't know that, do we?
We don't with any software. We're really at the mercy of the vendor.
Okay, thanks.
Further comments? We'll take Councillor Smith and then Councillor Grace.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Can you confirm whether this software interfaces with any other software applications that exist within our infrastructure? Does it feed information or receive information from other permitry?
Yes, it does. So that was one of our main concerns, and we have been looking and exploring this for over 2 years to make sure we got the right product for our community. And it'll integrate with our GIS, our present GIS, as for the minimal that it's used, as well as our financial software, Keystone. So at present, we're not looking to collect payment information over this system. This will just be the building permit, and we'll still use the traditional financial software for processing payments. We don't want another set of banking information.
Okay, and can you clarify, you mentioned that this is effectively a annual service fee. I assume that means that if there are software upgrades throughout the duration of this 5-year contract, they're included in that fee? Or is there a total cost of ownership with sort of an asset management plan that we need to consider?
It's an all-in one price.
Okay.
And it's the same price if we do 30 permits next year or 600 permits. It's the same same fee, and it includes all the updates, all the changes. If the Ontario Building Code changes, which it will in the next 5 years, those updates are made for us on our behalf.
Okay, and then my last, this is a comment, and it's a bit out of the box, but has there been any consideration given that you've mentioned other municipalities are interested in this same software to produce some sort of a cohort where you purchase at a bulk discount? I know you'd be right into this.
We certainly looked at it,
Okay.
but the value is still much better value in the Volta than we were looking at co-sharing other license agreements at the $140,000 for. So we're very pleased that at the $13,500.
Thank you. I appreciate your diligence.
Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill, Section 10.2 of the agreement says that Volta will take reasonable actions to protect against the loss or misuse of data, but neither party is responsible for the data security of the general communications network or any disturbance in the general communications network. Can you just comment generally about your feeling about the security of the arrangement?
Absolutely, and through you, Mr. Mayor, that was one of our biggest concerns moving ahead. Was first the usability of our builders, and then the security of the information. So it is a cloud-based format by one of, if not the most reputable cloud companies, Google, and it's a Canadian-based out of Montreal Google network or cloud service. So we were comfortable with that. The contract does speak about sharing some liability with the vendor, and I think in today's climate of software, no vendor would ever assume total liability for their software. However, we believe this is a higher level of service than we're providing today, and we're not going to collect any banking information at this time. That'll be done through traditional methods, and we feel that this is the most secure option we have for an online system. The information held there is not very personal in nature. It might be somebody's address at most and their home's building plan. We have looked into it, and we do have some insurance against cyber theft or cyber crime as a corporation.
Further questions? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Phil, my question is about the customer and how they interface with this. Is it going to be like an app they get on their phone and then they can just click on and find out where their permits are at and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So we will have some minimal hardware costs associated with it. We'll update some tablets and the vehicles and that kind of thing. Since it's cloud-based, it'll react in real time. So approximately 30 seconds, a minute after your installation inspection's done, you're going to get a notification as a builder to your phone and see you can schedule the drywaller or whatever to follow that inspection. So when you apply and when you complete your permit, you will open an app on your phone and you'll see all the stages of all the permits that are needed and when they come in, or if there's a concern, you'll see in real time why it didn't pass inspection, and you'll even get a photo of the header that needs changed or the wall that needs moved or the insulation fixed.
And are the builders enthused about this? Are they tech savvy in this type of thing? I'm not sure.
There'll be a transition period for sure where we'll help them through traditional methods, and we know that not every builder is tech savvy, and there'll still be an opportunity to come to the front counter, and we'll simply enter it into the system for them, and coach them along like we always have in the past. However, most of the builders that we've reached out to are really interested in this, just in the time it's going to save them. They don't have to make a phone call to check where that inspection's done. They can see when it's scheduled, and kind of exciting that way.
Anything further? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, I meant to ask. Just in response time, Phil, to service. If you have an issue, with the software? What are you being guaranteed? What are you hearing from other? Or is it, we're not the first in Ontario, obviously, are we? So what are you hearing from other municipalities, from response times, from their service desks when there's an issue?
Sure, I'll answer that in two ways. First, the municipalities that have it online now haven't seen any issues with it. There is Canadian, in fact, Ontario-based techs to support it if it was to go down. But if it was to go down, our fallback is just business as usual today. We'd everything's backed up, and we just help them in a more paper-intense.
What you're hearing from other municipalities, good response time, though? Pretty good?
Absolutely.
Okay, if there's nothing further, just thanks very much, Phil, for this presentation. It's a great step forward, I think, and heading in the direction that everything is heading anyway. So I think it makes great sense, and appreciate all of your work in bringing it to us. So you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. So that takes us to the second staff report on the water tanker refurbishment, and I guess the Director of Protective Services. Yes, the Director of Protective Services has the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Included in the 2019 capital budget is the replacement of a 1995 International water truck. Total project allocation for funding was $350,000. Following the tender process, we released the tender to a U.S.-based company for $249,000 Canadian. This is projecting a surplus of $100,000. We'd like to use that some of that $100,000 to refurbish an existing water truck, or the pieces, the valuable equipment of that water truck, to give us a second high-capacity water truck. The water trucks are a really nice arrangement in Saugeen Shores and are shared with Public Works and the fire department. Public Works uses them often to pre-treat gravel roads in the rural area, and they're absolutely necessary for the fire department to maintain a Superior Tanker Shuttle accreditation for rural areas where we don't have fire hydrants. We aren't proposing adding a vehicle. We're proposing updating and refurbishing and extending the life of an existing vehicle.
All right, we have a recommendation. I'll read it, then we can take questions or comments. It's recommended that Council allow excess funding from the 2019 capital project replacing one water tanker truck to be reallocated to refurbish and extend the life of another existing water tanker truck in the fleet, and that Council authorize a single-source contract be awarded to Cottrell Heavy Equipment in the amount of $77,610. Questions or comments? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Chief, you never cease to amaze me. You found another great deal. And with that, we were able to not only increase by one, but improve our fleet by two fantastic vehicles. And as you said at the bottom, you'll be getting rid of the older one, and we'll be getting a little bit of money back from that. I think it's a great opportunity, and well done.
Okay, further questions or comments? All right, you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. All right, that moves us then on to Infrastructure and Development and a staff report on proposed changes to the provincial policy statement and the Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The Provincial Policy Statement, or PPS, is a guiding document for planning throughout the province. It's a high-level document, and it's intended to protect environmental features as well as ensure there's an adequate supply of land for all types of uses. Currently, it's open for comments prior to implementing its proposed changes. Town staff propose to comment on 4 sections: facilitating more homes, climate change, streamlining of development, and cooperation with Indigenous communities. The underlying message in all sections is to have the province develop guidelines and standards that all municipalities can use, while allowing for flexibility in local area decisions, as well as supporting, whether financially or just through policy, the local planning initiatives, so that innovation in our community could continue to go forward. So with this, we look for support from Council to allow us to write the letter and comments back.
Okay, there's a recommendation, and I'll read it. It's recommended that Council endorse the comments outlined in the report regarding the proposed changes to the provincial policy statement, and that the comments be forwarded to Huron-Bruce MPP Lisa Thompson and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs prior to October 21, 2019. Questions or comments from committee members? Councillor Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Amanda, and your team for putting this together. I am going to be supporting this, that you go forward with your recommendations. I think all of these things are things that in one way or another have hampered our community in our ability to move projects forward in a timely manner, and putting more flexibility back into the municipalities to decide their own fates, so to speak, is something that I would never be against. Doing it in a manner that is sustainable and promotes the interests of climate change and all those things. I think it's a good thing, and I look forward to supporting it. Thanks.
Okay, further comments from members? I don't see any. I just agree with Councillor Mayette. It's a good report. I think lots of good comments in there, and indeed these changes to the PPS in general, I think, do and are intended to increase flexibility for municipalities to make decisions, to govern our own house, as it were. And I think that that's going to be ultimately positive. But there are some important areas where some clarification is required, and this report does a good job of pointing those out. So you've heard the recommendation. I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. So that moves us on to 7.7, communications, petitions for information. Any comments from any members on any of those? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments with regards to the correspondence from Mr. John Mann. It's unfortunate that the large crowd that was here in the gallery has decided to leave, because there were several points, and I won't get into the personal content of the letter, but more that the questions that it poses with regards to the process that was used for the RFP, and there were certainly during our open forum several opinions expressed that the RFP process was too closed, that it was too narrow, that it was too short, that it didn't allow for proper competition, that it should be reopened, and I think my opinion does not align with the opinions of those that were expressed here earlier, because I know that the talk around the development of this was certainly a buzz before the RFP was open. So if there were developers, and I know there were developers, others, and I was surprised that only one came forward with an actual proposal. There was others that were there, and it was certainly it was known to other interested parties that this was something that was going to be coming up. So to say that people didn't have time, I think really is not characterizing the process well. And I think that the process that was used was one that did allow people to consider. It allowed the flexibility to move the footprint. It allowed the flexibility of the duration of the lease, and I think all of those things were done well. If you'd looked at the RFP that was put out discreetly, you could easily pick it apart, but when you look at it as a whole, I think it covered all the bases, and I am in full support of moving forward with the process that we have begun without taking any steps backwards. Thank you.
Further comments on any of the pieces of correspondence? Okay, that moves on then to item 8, reports. Municipal Council don't have any of those. Item 9, report of department heads, and there's one item, an information report on the Cold Bridge Structural Monitoring Report. And do you have some comments? The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Sure, thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to give a quick reason why we put this information report together. My predecessors had created a bridge master plan of which bridges we were going to open, and the work through there, the Cold Bridge and the McEwen Bridge and the Moore Bridge are all in that. So as we're working through these bridges, the McEwen Bridge, hopefully we'll get some funding as we applied for that. But this bridge is in disrepair and is still safe to go on, but GM Blue Plan has sort of put us on notice to start putting it in your plan to replace. So that is what we intend to do with this information.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments to that, the Vice Deputy Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, I really appreciate this report. I had a fairly lengthy conversation with a resident from Saugeen Township just this past weekend about Gold Bridge, and it's a good news story to hear that, well, at least the director saying the council needs to start preparing to replace that bridge. From what I'm hearing from residents in the area, is that bridge is pretty important, that it's maintained and that's replaced. It's a big ticket item. It's a big ticket item, but I keep hearing from residents out there that's a very important piece of our infrastructure in this community that needs to be maintained. So it's a good news report, and I hope when it comes to council for budget approval that we have some good. I'm sure we'll have some good, meaningful discussion over that one. Question I do have about the McEwen Bridge. Am I correct? Just refresh my memory here. Did we receive funding, Mr. Mayor, for replacement of that bridge recently? Was it $850,000, or am I incorrect with that number? Did we receive funding just recently for
Director?
that?
Not yet. We have not formally received any of the federal money, so we are one of the projects that was forwarded from the province onto the feds, but we have not.
We've applied.
We have applied.
We've made application.
Yes, but we have not received a funding announcement.
It's important to remember that that's a two-step process. The province, you make an application to the province then nominates your project to the federal government, and the federal government makes the final decision. So so the provincial step has been taken, the federal step is yet to be taken.
So we've made applications. That's a good sign. And so I know we're getting off topic about that bridge, but the plan there is to replace, correct? If we can find the funding, that is.
Director?
So through you, for the capital budget, for the next 4 years, we're putting away $500,000 each year so that when we go to reconstruct, we'll have the money in the bank prior to the project for McEwen Bridge.
Well, let's hope we get good news about the second bridge, too. Thank you.
Councillor Mayette.
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Amanda, for the report. This coal bridge is one that is near and dear to my heart. I can see it from my kitchen window every day, and I actually used it 2 times yesterday. So I really enjoy having a bridge there. And it's also one that I too had conversations with some of the residents, some of the longer-term residents, and some of them can remember when the bridge was built. If you talk to the right people, I can't remember when it was built, but I can remember when one of the abutments was replaced just before amalgamation. There was a project underfoot to replace the abutment on the south side was replaced. So I presume that the monitors that you've got are on the abutment on the north side that was not replaced. Is that correct?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the northwest wing wall is shown as being stable, but it is the southeast wing wall that has visible movement and a crack.
Okay. So it's the newer wing wall. Okay. And presumably the movement takes place during periods of, I'm thinking around March when the ice breakup goes through. I know when the ice goes through that section, it's quite a raging torrent for a number of hours, if not days. And then I presume that's because under normal conditions you wouldn't see much movement, right?
I would assume that's the case. It is the upstream side of the abutment that we're seeing the movement on.
Okay, and it's sort of turning into the river? Is that what I took when I tried to put your words into actions?
Yeah, I guess it's twisting that way.
Yeah. All right, well, like Vice Deputy Mayor Mayette said, I fully support the funding of these bridges and welcome any provincial, federal infrastructure funding that will help us do that. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on that? Okay, thank you very much for the report. So that brings us to the end of the agenda, and we'll do a round of announcements by members. The Deputy Mayor.
For those members and members of the public that haven't been paying attention to the news, climate action is the rage across the world right now, and this week our students at Saugeen District Senior School will be holding a climate action day on Thursday, so you may be receiving some information from them or request to attend a little rally that they may be holding on Thursday.
Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 3 items. Well, I'll limit it to, I'll just quickly, and you may want to speak to the Minister of the Environment. Minister Jeff Urick visited our community this past week to talk about the Unit 4 windmill. You may want to speak to that a little bit later. It was a good meeting. And Conservation Authority, Councillor Grace and I attended a meeting this past week to talk about how we may find some operational efficiencies, some ways that the two conservation authorities may be able to work together. Both of the CAO general managers have recently retired, and so we had a good chat about how we may be able to find efficiencies. And this past Sunday was a fun day, and I just wanted to say thank you to the TD Bank, TD Green program, and the Saugeen Realtor Association, and 15 volunteers show up for the tree planting day. And I attended. I try to get there every year. And we planted about 150 trees in a matter of 35, 40 minutes. And you know, two members of the Conservation Authority showed up too, staff members, on a Sunday. And so I just wanted to say thank you to those groups. TD Green, 400,000 trees are up to now planting across Canada, and their goal is 1 million trees by 2030. So it's a good program. And anyone out along the Saugeen Rail Trail, you know, in the new asphalt area, you'll see trees. They're lined on both sides of the Saugeen Rail Trail. So it was a really good team effort this past Sunday. So thank you to the volunteers.
Councillor Schreider.
Thank you. I just want to congratulate the community on the number of nominations that we had for the Kraft Heinz Project Play. It closed at midnight this morning, and we had over 550 nominations for that. So if we are fortunate enough to be one of the top 4 communities, then we have a very tight window of time to organize our voting weekend and to go after the $250,000 that we're going for the Lamont Sports Park. So members of our leagues, our committees, our volunteer groups, our schools, and our residents, we will be reaching out. We're going to be proactive and start to plan our voting weekend in anticipation, if we are successful, of being one of the top 4. So with all the hype and promotion of the Lamont Sports Park, we'll also be looking at and discussing some fundraising options and potentially a fundraising campaign for this amazing project as well. So we can't do it alone, that we'll need all the players, the fans, the residents to assist us in getting, first of all, the $250,000 and also the remainder of the funds. So congratulations to Saugeen Shores, and hopefully we will find out on October 12th if we are one of the top 4.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Today I had the privilege of representing the municipality at the 16th Annual Women in Nuclear Conference. It's a national conference that was held right here in Saugeen Shores at Unifor. It saw over 300 attendees from across the nuclear sector and was also attended by the Associate Minister of Energy, Bill Walker, and MPP Lindsay Park. So I welcome those individuals who are still in our community and thank them for choosing Saugeen Shores.
Thank you. Councillor Rich.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I just want to remind everyone that Ladies on the Lake is coming up in October, and it's time now to sign up and get ready to participate for those ladies that want to do so. Southampton Gaia.
Okay. Councillor Grace.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I actually have 4 items. I'll try to be brief. The first is that I wanted to congratulate the Canadian Big Band Committee, which celebrated its 25th year this past weekend. And Charlie and Debbie Bell get a special shout out for being the leaders of this organization that's been very, very successful and a great event for our town for 25 years. On September 15th, I attended, and so did Vice Deputy Mayor Mai, at the annual Rail Trail Memorial Ceremony at the Memorial Garden in Southampton. And this year's speaker was a guest from the Palmerston Railway Heritage Museum, who had researched and presented a very moving account of the Hurricane Hazel Railroad accident in Southampton, which happened 65 years ago almost, at the on the Southampton Railroad track, unfortunately. And I wanted to thank again our Rail Trail Board members and volunteers who put many hours into caring for the Memorial Garden, for the River Street Station, and the trail itself. This coming October 2nd, it would be a week from this coming Wednesday, the Chamber of Commerce is organizing a public all candidates meeting for the federal election. It's going to be in the Rotary Hall. Once again, October 2nd, with a start time of the debate at 6:30. And the meet and greet section will start at 6. And finally, the Canadian Federation of University Women held their first meeting, general members meeting of this season on last Wednesday night. And one of the things they did was to hand out scholarships. Altogether this year, we approved $4,500 worth of scholarships, $1,500 for high school students. And last Wednesday night, there were $3,000 scholarships given out, one to a mature woman returning to school, and two to young women who have graduated and are pursuing post-secondary studies who were coming out of foster care. One of those scholarships is very special because it's the inaugural year of the Carolyn Day Scholarship. Carolyn was a long-term member of the CFUW, was sat on the school board for a long time, and many, many other things that she did. And so her family has generously contributed a $1,000 scholarship every year for a young woman coming out of care. And so this was the first year that was happening. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carr? Councillor Mayette?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just say a reminder about the coming open house at the police station. Many will notice that the police station is nearing completion, and on Wednesday at noon, we're going to 2 o'clock. I would have been there early anyway. 2 o'clock. There's going to be the ribbon cutting and some words spoken by those in attendance, and I believe some refreshments and a chance for you all to see a magnificent facility.
The Vice Deputy Mayor had something to add.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to mention to you, the people you employ at Highbury Farms are wonderful people, and they bring amazing food to our table every day of the week, in the summertime at least. Last night, my wife and I had the good fortune of helping to serve a meal at the Port Elgin United Church to your fine employees from Mexico. And I just wanted to say, one of your employees stood up and said some very nice things about Saugeen Shores and how well received they are here, and they are, and we do appreciate all the great work they do for our community. And I just think it's important to recognize those people. So I just wanted to let you know, I meant to talk to you about that today, but it was a great evening. So
good. We'll certainly appreciate that and agree. I just two things, I guess. I attended the opening of the John White Celebrity Photography exhibition at the Bruce County Museum a couple of weeks, nearly 2 weeks ago now, and it's an excellent exhibition. I encourage you all to get there. Lots of pictures of people who are much better looking than I am there, and you should go check that out. I also attended the big band on Saturday afternoon, and really, I'd never been to the Saturday afternoon event, or the Saturday events for that. It really is an unbelievable event. Really fantastically done. I just want to echo Councillor Grayson congratulating that committee on 25 years. And as the Vice Deputy Mayor alluded to last week, what was it on? I can't remember the date of the week now. On last Thursday, right, the 19th. It was Wednesday. Last Wednesday, the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks was here in the Plex, along with Minister Thompson, and it was just a low-key meeting where folks who live in proximity to the Unifor wind turbine were able to talk to him about their experiences, and I just would like to say that I think it's 2 or 3 years ago, it would have been impossible or unheard of for the Minister of the Environment to come here and talk to us about that. And so that gesture was deeply appreciated, I know, by the residents, certainly by myself and a couple of members of council who were there. And very much appreciated, and certainly hope that the government and ministry takes those comments that they heard into account, and implements policy that helps people like that. So, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Schreider. All in favor. We'll reconvene at about 8 o'clock.